Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Parnassus training session for access to higher education. My name's Tom, and I'm part of the IT team here at Ascentis. And today we're really excited to bring with you what we've been working on for the past couple of years, and that's Parnassus. So we've been really trying to streamline and make it simpler and more efficient, our registration system that we're using. And in line with the comms you should have already received, the Parnassus registration system will be replacing QuartzWeb in January 2024. So today we're going to run through a quick live demo of how we can register a cohort, how we can register learners to that cohort, and how we can apply grades to a set of learners within the cohort or class. So I'm going to quickly go to Parnassus now. So this is the login page for Parnassus. Just a quick note, I'm just using a demo center account today. Any active accounts which you have in QuartzWeb when Parnassus goes live will be brought over by us. You don't have to worry about setting up any users for the go live date. Any setup which you currently have in QuartzWeb will be pulled across. And then any further accounts after the go live date will then work in the same way, where a super user or a center will be able to create those. But for now, I'm just going to log in. So as you can see, this is the landing page for Parnassus. Looks a bit different than QuartzWeb, and I promise you it's a lot smoother and a lot easier to use. So the main feature of today is the registrations. But before we get stuck in, I just want to run over a couple of changes and how things look a bit differently in Parnassus compared to QuartzWeb. So along the top of the page, we can see there are a couple of new headings, and we're going to click into centers to begin with. So as you can see, this is an overview of the Loon Valley College. So Loon Valley, it's not a real center. It's one created by Ascentis for testing and demo purposes. None of the information we're looking at here is live. It's all just for demo and testing purposes. So as you might expect from a center overview page, we can see all the different information, center codes, approved status, different options. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see some of the sites that have been created. So this actually is a little bit different in Parnassus in how it works, and for the better. So the way QuartzWeb used to work was any provisions which your center had, they were formally tied to the center level. So your center had provisions, and they cascaded down to all your sites. The way Parnassus works is the provisions are site level. So you can really get some custom configuration going with your sites and really make them different and use them to the full potential. An example would be if you had 3 sites or 2 sites, you wanted one site to have access provisions, you can do that. And then your second site, if you wanted off-qual or other provisions, custom provisions, you could set them to have them as well. So you're really separating them 2 sites and what they can do. Another example that you might find is if you ever were to go through a merger into a group or another center, you can merge, or a center can merge with you, and all the sites can keep their own provisions. They don't have to lose anything. They can all stay separate. So it's really customizable. It's really useful. It's a really good change. So that's just a quick top level view at the centers. Just bear in mind that if you think I'm going through things a bit too quickly, the focus is registrations, but I'm just showing you a top level. We will have further videos, further training sessions, and we'll have a handbook for the go live date, which will detail every button, every page. So don't worry if I'm going a bit too fast, because it will all be covered again in the future before the go live date. So going back to the options at the top, the next one I'm going to click on is learners. So as you can see, it will give us a list of learners that are currently registered to the center. And we can see there's a lot of different learners here. All of these are just being used for testing at the moment. But we could click into one and have a look. So as we can see here, this is landing page for the learners tab. and we have some new options underneath. So we can really start filling out some further learner information if needed. So we have a couple of tabs here at the bottom. First one I've clicked on is details. Then we have access. So this is where any learning assistance can be suggested here and labeled. We have registrations. So this tab shows any active registrations which the learner is currently on. We have cohorts. The same principle, any active cohorts which the learner is on will appear here. So just a quick mention, if you see us mentioning cohorts is a new terminology we're using for classes. So we just felt that the old terminology for classes didn't really explain what it was properly. So because it's not always a classroom of learners, it's more of a group of learners sharing a group with learning a specific qualification. So we just feel like cohort describes that term a little bit better. So if you see us mentioning cohort a lot, we're just referring to class. And if we go to the next tab, we can see certificates. So in this tab, we'd be able to see any previous achievement that the learner has achieved. If it's from your center, you'll see the full details. But if the learner achieved it at a different center within Parnassus, you'll see the qualification they've achieved, but you won't see where they've achieved it, just for GDPR reasons. And then at the end, any documents tied to the learner will appear here. So that's just a really quick overview of the Learner tab. And the next one I'm going to click on is Certificates. This is where you'll view any of your e-certificates that will have been processed after the registrations and grading has been completed. Very straightforward. This is where you find your e-certificates. Clicking on Reporting. This is where all your reports will live. Now, along with any standard reports, which all centers will receive, we've got a new thing called custom reports. And it's new in the fact that we can build custom reports on site now from the Ascentis side. So if you have any ideas for reports which you think which will save you time in the future, or a lot of centers will find use for, you can suggest them to us, and in the future we can develop them in-house. So we now have full control about how reports work, and it just makes it a very powerful tool because we can spend a lot of time in it, invest time into it in the future, and just make some really powerful reports. But without further ado, we'll get on to the area of this demo today, and that's registrations. So as I mentioned before, cohort is the new terminology for classes. Just a quick note as well, before we get stuck into the classes. Any current classes that you have in QuartzWeb will be carried over into Parnassus by us, like the logins, and they will be named cohorts instead of classes. So they'll all be carried over. You don't need to transfer anything that exists in QuartzWeb already, just anything live that needs to be registered after the Parnassus live date. That'll be for yourself, but anything previous will be done by us. So first things first, we're going to have to create a cohort or class. So because my account is tied to the Loon Valley College, we can see that Loon Valley has been selected by default at the top. We can then choose a site. At this point, you would choose a site dependent on the provisions which you need to meet the qualification and the cohort. So I'm just going to click the main site. Qualification, we can choose one here. And cohort title is just a reference so you know what the cohort is. So I'm just going to type one in now. So now we've got the label. You can see there's a couple more options. Mandatory fields, as before, start and end date. This is how it's also done in QuartzWeb. We put start and end date for the cohort. A couple of options at the bottom, which are optional. We can do max registrations. We can do number of resources and estimated attendees. So if you wanted to put a hard cap on how many registration can be made, you can put that in here. Just to make note, though, if this is done at this level, and then you try to make registrations at a later date, it abides by the rule for whichever registration number has been put here. If you leave it blank, it means there's no max registrations. So another change, which I'll mention now, is when we're creating the cohort or class, at this level, we're required to use the purchase order. So if I tried to create this cohort class now without the purchase order, it'll give me this prompt. So I'm just going to put random number in for now, but the purchase order is needed to create the cohort. And now I'm going to save this. So as you can see, it's created a cohort for me now. It's just a blank one right now. There's no learners attached to it. It's no grades. It's just a new cohort class with a qualification attached to it. So the next step is to register some learners. So I'm going to quickly switch over to my registration file and show you how that looks. So as we can see, here is the registration file with a couple of different fields, and the fields I filled in are first name, surname, date of birth, gender, male, female, and the units. So these units are tied to the qualification I just did. So we can see there's a red highlighted entry here. This is just a duplicate learner. So we're going to see what Parnassus does when we try to upload a learner that's already registered into a different qual. Just to make note, there is a tab here called Learner Code, but I won't be filling this out now. But just to make note, because I will be referring back to it later. So now I'm going to go back to Parnassus and upload this report. So now we're back to Parnassus. We're back on the cohort we just created. I'm going to click Registration Upload. On the right-hand side, we have different options. I'm going to click Registration Upload. So once we've clicked the Upload button, we'll be prompted with a file upload window. So I'm just going to select the file that I just looked at. I'm going to give it a name. And I'm going to import it. Just to mention at this point as well, if you do create a cohort and you want to register learners like I've just done, you can come back to the cohort at a later date and do the process again. You can come back and upload another registration form with different learners, and that will just add to the cohort, as long as the maximum registrars is not higher than what you've set. So now I'm going to click into my current file list. And as we can see, these learners now adhere to what appeared on my registration document that I just showed you. You can see a couple of different colors here. We have a green background and we have a red background. So Parnassus works a bit similar to like a traffic light system, where if you see a green background behind your learner, it means that Parnassus is happy to accept this learner in its current state. Everything's been checked and it's happy. If we see a red background, it means that in its current state, it won't be uploaded to the cohort. So we need to find out why. So the easiest way to do this is to hide the valid registrations, because we only care about fixing the broken ones. As we can see here, we have 3 different learners with 3 error codes. So to find out what went wrong, we can click on this little document error report icon, and I'm going to click it now. So what I did purposely previously on the form, I put in an old unit. So this unit was deactivated. So when you have an error like that, it will show up in red, and we can click on this icon to see what it was. So in this instance, we know what's wrong with it. So I'm going to delete these registrations because I know these units were incorrect. I'm going to unhide the valid registrations. And now we can see at the bottom, we have 24 total registrations and all 24 are valid. Just a quick note as well. The last registration has a little person icon here. This means that the user is a duplicate. So even though it will be accepted, we still need to action this to make sure it's actioned correctly. So to do that, we can do it manually on this side of the registration screen. We can click it. We get an option here, and we can either use a learner that's already on the system, or we can create a new learner. So I'm going to create a new learner for this example. So you may think, if you had 100 learners who are duplicates, do I have to click manually every time? No, you don't. I'm just doing it this way to show you how to do it manually. But if you remember back to the registration form, when we had the learner ID tab, if you have a current learner, you can put the right ID in there and it will bypass the duplicate checking system and you won't have to do any of this. So this is just for the demo purposes. And then what happens is, once we've highlighted the duplicate learner, this learner will then be forwarded to a Ascentis just for verification. And when we're happy it's all done, it will then get pushed back to the cohort. But for now, we now have 24 valid registrations, and I'm ready to validate this and import it into the cohort. So at this stage, this is like the holding bay for the cohort. They're not in the cohort yet because we need to make some checks. And now I'm pushing them into the cohort. Like I said, if you think I'm going things a bit too quickly, we will have further sessions and further training. So now we can see that's disappeared from the current file list and it's in the files processing. So I'm going to go back to the class cohort I just created, Friday afternoon cohort demo, go to learners, and I can see my 2 learners are here and my 3rd duplicate learner has been sent for verification. So as of now, we have 2 learners. And just a quick note, when filling out your registration form on the cohort, you can click the unit tab. So once you create your cohort, you know the call ID. If you want to find any unit IDs, click on unit tab within the cohort and you can see the full list of units all in one place. So as long as you have that qualification ID, you can find everything else you need in Parnassus. So I'm happy with that now. We have learners registered to this cohort, so now we're ready to achieve them. So to do that, we're going to click the option underneath what we just clicked. So instead of registration, we're going to click Add Achievement, and that's on the top hand right side, and it's the green buttons. So now we're going to give these learners grades. So when we click that button, it prompts this new page, and it fills out a lot of the information for us because it's just linking the details that was found in the cohort. A couple of options that we can change are how we grade, and we can do it by every unit which has been registered for the cohort, or we can choose specific units if you'd like. But for now, I'm going to choose all units to be graded. It gives the date, which is already filled in. Now, at this point, because it's an access course, there are a few grading options. So we can choose to give the registrations some default grades, depending if it's mandatory or if it's optional or graded, it will have different pass criteria. So if I choose distinction, it will grade every register distinction which that grade applies to. If they need to have an achieved or not achieved grade, it will leave it blank, which I'm going to show you now. So for now, I'm going to put distinction as a default grade, and I'm going to apply it to the learners that we just registered. So as we can see, we have the list of learners here. The different entries are all the different units, and we can see some of the grades have already been filled in. So these grades are the correct grades applying to that unit. Any grades which I'll say no grade entered need the pass achieved or not achieved entry. So I'm going to fill these out now. So a good idea would be to default the grade to the qualification with the highest amount that's been achieved, and then it saves a lot of legwork later on. So once I've checked all these, I'm happy they've all got a grade. And we can give this a file name. Just a quick note as well, you may see another option in the middle. So this allows us to, we're already on a direct entry screen, but we also have the function to direct entry a unit which hasn't been registered via the form, we always recommend to put any registrations on the form at the beginning of the registration, because getting things right in the first step just speeds things up later on. But if you ever needed to manually enter a grade for a unit which doesn't appear in the registration, you can do that here. But for now, I'm going to save and then create this import file. So as we can see, everything's highlighted green. So now Parnassus is telling us, okay, you've uploaded your learners, you've given them awards, give them the grades. We're now happy to send this off. So at the bottom, you can add a note if you'd like. I'm not going to in this case. And the next step would be to click validate and send. A bit of flavor text pops up, just confirming that if you are the correct person to be sending off the grades, to do so. And I'm just going to confirm this and click validate and send. So now in this stage, we can see the file we were working on in the current file list has now moved down to files and processing. This means that it's been sent to Ascentis for verification and just to follow our due diligence. So at this stage, Ascentis done everything they need to as far as registrations. They've entered the grades. And once Ascentis have done the verifications, this file will move down to files processed. And that means that they are ready to be certified, the learners, either by e-certificate or hard copy. Just a quick mention that any preferences your centre has now with e-certificate or hard copies, they will carry over. So if you have both or have one or the other, then they will carry over to Parnassus. And that's it for now. I've gone through the registration process. Like I said, don't worry if you feel like the pace was a bit too quickly or there's areas which you wanted us to look at, which we didn't in this session. We will be doing more sessions. There'll be the full handbook, which will go through every button in detail. This video has been recorded as well, so you can always play back to it. And there will be a questionnaire sent at the end, so you can ask any more specific questions if you haven't had a chance to do in the chat. But yeah, I hope you all have a good evening and a good weekend, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.